me okay? Hopefully, yeah, cool. So I'm going to talk with you a little bit about a non-agile approach to software development that we can adapt to be more suited to the software space. So imagine that you're on a team and you're given a project that you have to do where maybe you don't have very clear requirements on not very clear requirements at first, limited hours and small team, so just limited resources, and you can't really predict where you're going to be in the project at any point in the future. And so this is really challenging because it makes it hard for us to schedule our work, and it's just hard for us to know what we should be doing at any point in time. And so in some industries, they would approach this with a philosophy called critical path methods. And if we look at this chart, we can just imagine time moving to the right, and things on the left have to get done before things on the right. So there's kind of this notion of functional dependencies. To build the chart, you would have to know what the final requirements would be at the very end, and then work your way backwards to figure out what to start on earlier. And there's this notion of a critical path, which is some sequence of events where if you were to delay that stuff happening, then the entire project gets delayed. So that's where the word critical path comes from. And this approach it's well suited to things where you have to plan everything in advance, but it doesn't really work for software because we can change things as we go. And so there's some ways that we could adapt this approach to software development. So because our requirements may not be clear at first, we can still at least just try to start out with a rough outline of how we might be able to get to the finished product and just keep it kind of loose at first. Another issue is that our customer might decide that they just have different requirements now, and so we have to be able to adapt to that. And so we could still use this approach and just change our plan on a daily basis. Another issue is that it is kind of hard for us to predict exactly how fast we're going to move along things in the future. And so we could just not lie to ourselves about being able to exactly predict how fast things are going to move. And if there is some sort of critical path that's the crucial thing to be working on at first, that will probably just come up in discussions with the team, so we don't have to really formalize that. But the notion of some things having to happen before others is very relevant for us. And so we can still use this approach of thinking what our best idea of what the minimum viable product would look like, and plan backwards from that, and that can help us figure out what to do right now. So on a project that I worked on a 3-person team where we made a Rails app that was just a simple e-commerce app, this is our sort of agile critical path plan this is how we started out. So just to illustrate, if we wanted to, for example, have some page where we have items that are sorted by category, well, we'd first have to have a category model finished before that, and also a regular items index finished before that. And we would have to work on the item model before we could do the item index. And so this just helps us see that, okay, the item model is something we can work on right away up front. And so in this thing, we just put a node in green once it was done, and then things still to do are in white. And one more note that I'll make is say for admin authorization, since that's later on in the future, we're not really defining exactly what that's going to look like right now. But later on, we can kind of fill in the details a little bit more as we get a little bit more information about what that might look like. And so that's pretty much it, in that we can do this light version of critical path methods. It's helpful so that we can see what has to get done before what, and so that helps us focus our efforts on doing things that we can actually ship quickly. it also can help our team be a little bit more like have individual people work on things independently that would make the entire team's development velocity move forward a little bit more quickly. And in my experience, we just had a just positive experience doing this kind of thing, and it was not stressful at all, and it felt great. So hopefully you can consider light critical path methods to be a thing in your project management toolbox in the future. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions or additional thoughts about that? Yeah. Just because we might not know exactly how that would be implemented later, but we might find out more as we get closer to it. So. Great question. We just did this in actually just in PowerPoint. Later on, afterwards, we found a tool called MindMap. It's like, I want to say mindmapper.org or something like that. That's kind of a better GUI for doing this, but in this case, we just we just use PowerPoint. I think also a great way to do it would be sticky notes on a whiteboard. Sticky notes on a whiteboard, and just, you can rearrange them as you need. So that's another option.
So looking at it, it seems like you have some of those look like Ruby objects, like for the cart photo, and then some of them look like functionality, like log in and log out. And it seems like they're mixed. It'd be hard to. I'm just kind of wondering, can you talk about that? Like, is there maybe one better than the other one?
Sure. Yeah. Probably the better approach would be to have just like user stories in here instead of implementation details. In this case, a cart, plain old Ruby object, is a design implementation decision that we made, but probably a better way to put it would be maybe in terms of like the user story about the cart, maybe. Yeah.
But those boxes might just end up being user stories.
Exactly. So yeah, what pieces of a user story depend on something else being done already.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. Cool. All right, thank you.
This video has been sponsored by Rieta Incorporated. Learn more today at rietta.com.